What's up? What's up? What's up? We are back. It is Monday. It is 8:30. So you guys know what that means. It is time for Conversations with Teresa. I am so thrilled that you guys would choose to be here on a Monday night with us. Thank you so much for tuning in. Tonight's going to be really, really great. It's all great. They're all really, really great. But tonight we get a chance to talk about something that is it affects all of us in one way or another. If it's not personally, it's somebody that you know. And we're going to be talking about depression, seasonal depression, and just that in general, and then some specifics in that. We realize that it is a big challenge. It is a big struggle for so many people. And I'm hoping that tonight's podcast will really be able to help you be really, really in tuned with the needs of whether it's yourself or with other people. So tonight we have a good friend of mine. He's going to be on here tonight. His name is Joe Gerena. We're going to come on and welcome him in. We are so, so grateful to be able to have Joe Gerena here in the studio with us. We are thrilled. Thank you so much, Joe, for coming on. This is going to be such an amazing show, such an informative show, such an important podcast. So thank you for joining us with Podcast for Teresa for Monday night.
Hey, Teresa, thanks for having me. Thanks for creating a platform like this.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, like I do all the time, I got to brag on you a little bit. So I'm just going to read your bio. You're going to sit there. You're just going to take it in. You're going to be like, okay, I know. That's me. I'm cool like that. But you are cool like that. So here we go. Joseph is an experienced nonprofit professional with 18 plus years of experience in program development and an in-depth knowledge of youth and adult education theory and technique. For the past 10 years, he has been passionate about working as a psychotherapist. In 2020, he branched out and started a private practice to meet the growing demand in our community. And that he is the founder of Talk to Me, LLC, where he really does get a chance to help the people right here in our community thrive, to be their better selves, and to work through the things that they need to work through. So thank you so much. And Joe, one last thing I'll say about him, he's focused on his own self-care, eating healthy, and being a thriving member of his community. So thank you so much for being all that. And I've seen your healthy eating habits. Yeah, you on that. I'm gonna let you do that. Anyway, Joe, thank you again so much for coming. Like I said, you know, being able to talk about depression, seasonal depression, there are so many different facets that we may or may not even know about. And like I was saying before, it's likely that if it's not ourselves, it's likely that we know someone that lives with depression or seasonal depression. And I was just looking at some stats earlier today. You can tell me if I'm on point or if CNN is on point. I didn't make this up, but I read that 18.4% of U.S. adults reported having ever been diagnosed with depression in their lifetime. That the prevalence of depression was found to be like 24% women, 13% men, and 21% in younger adults, 18 to 24. Does that even seem like, those numbers to me are already crazy, but does that even touching the iceberg, touching the top? I can't even say it.
Yeah,
Like we anywhere near there.
sure. I mean, the numbers sound low, but I also think that the numbers are going to be skewed in our communities. So they'll be higher. And what we do know is in the past 3 years, the numbers for youth in our country have skyrocketed in terms of depression and anxiety. And sometimes it's hard to kind of differentiate between the two anyway, like whether someone's depressed or whether they're anxious.
Well, and can you talk a little bit about that? Because we hear these words, they're almost like they're such common words, almost like hello, depressed, anxiety.
Yeah,
Why is this? Why is it so prevalent now? Why is it among so many of our young people? What's going on?
right. So I think a lot of different things happened. I mean, we had a shutdown for our children where they couldn't go to school. Then they were learning on a computer. Then they were going to school after they were told that it wasn't safe to be in school. So
Mm,
many reasons for children to be super anxious. And if you just kind of look at their own development, their developmental needs, like they need to be around one another and socialize, and that was taken from them. But then
mm,
you're thrust back into that environment, and there are going to be some uncomfortable feelings that children experience. And some children never went back to school because they couldn't handle the stress of being in person again. So
mm,
I think that that's a big part of it. And as far as the difference between depression and anxiety, I mean, sometimes you're kind of splitting hairs when you're trying to ask someone to describe the symptoms,
mhm,
and it's hard to describe something that you've never had words for. Like if you would have
mm,
asked me growing up if I was depressed, I would have said no. But in looking back at what I thought and felt like and experienced as a child, I'd say, yeah, I was feeling depressed when I was in elementary school. Like it's, I just
mm.
I didn't have words for it. I didn't have vocabulary for it. I didn't know what I was looking for.
Right, right. And would it be something? Hmm, see if I want to ask this question. Is it good for us to give our young people this vocabulary, or do we start then
Uh,
kind of making some stuff up? Like what do we do to make sure that we are taking care
um,
of us?
I think we're always better when we name it. When we don't name it, that's when it's problematic. And
Mm,
what happens, especially with our children, like sometimes our children they don't want to be, they don't want to add stress to the family, so
mhm,
they kind of keep things in, or they could say, you know, I don't feel good. You know, but what does that even mean? So I think the more that we can kind of name things and identify it
mhm,
and help not just children. I mean, I treat adults the same way I treat children. I give them the same handouts because the adults don't have vocabulary for it. So
mm,
I don't expect our children to have vocabulary if our adults can't describe that they have depressive symptoms, or they can't even explain the emotions that they're experiencing because they're not even used to using emotive words.
mm. Okay. So what would be some of those, or what are some of those words? And I'm looking at it, or I'm listening to you through the lens of a couple different things, right? One, myself, how would I recognize if I were uh, depressed as opposed to just feeling sad?
Mhm.
What kind of things am I looking at? What should I be looking out for me for?
Right. So I would think about it as, you know, something that you experience versus a state of being. So if I witness something that is upsetting to me, you know, I'm going to have an emotional response to it. But if I keep returning to that event again and again and again, and I can't kind of shake that feeling, and then I don't want to get up for work, or I don't want to do things that I know I need to do or that are important for me to do. Now we're talking about a state of being. So there's a difference between experiencing a feeling like sadness
Mm-hmm.
um, and lacking energy. Sometimes people describe depression as their whole body hurts, no energy, can't leave, you know, can't get out of bed. Some people are mute, like they cannot speak. So we're talking about, you know, there's a continuum here. And when you
Right,
look at how we live in our communities, a lot of times like people are depressed, but they're still going to work.
right, right.
So then it's really hard to identify. But in most cases, what I experience is people don't really have an awareness of what it is that they're feeling and experiencing because they're just so used to pushing through
That's
and
very true.
meeting needs or meeting expectations.
And I would imagine just saying that, I think about women in particular, right? Um, we get sick. It doesn't matter. We still got to feed the kids. We still need to, do whatever that we need to do to make it happen. We're still going to try to get up and clean the house.
Sure, sure.
We do that, and so then we just might be missing out on that diagnosis, on that
Mhm.
right diagnosis, and like
Sure.
you said, just pushing through.
I think also, at times people have a tremendous guilt about, you know, I have such a good life, so like, why should I be sad, or why should I be,
Mm,
or why should I feel down? Like I have more than other people, so then it becomes complicated because I think there are times where there's a lot of denial going on.
mhm.
Like I feel really sad, or I don't get as excited about life anymore. But no, I'm not depressed. So there's this denial when if you just kind of ask people to describe what it is that they're experiencing, it's like you've been dealing with depression for quite some time. So
Right,
so
right,
I think, and like other symptoms would be like the inability to think, on a complex level because you're so stressed, or a high degree of irritability. I have people who report like they're going to work and like everybody's bothering them, and it'd be like, yeah,
mm,
like I don't like her voice, like, and it's like, okay, that's a lot, because 2 weeks ago you told me you really loved everybody you worked with. So like, what happened?
right, right.
Mhm.
Okay. And so you're making me ask all these different questions. I'm literally thinking about me. So when you think about, or thinking about being depressed, can you be depressed for like a week and then be done? Is it longer? Like what?
Yeah. So we're talking about a very, very imperfect science, right? So the way it works is the kind of the cutoff is going to be 3 weeks, right? So if you've had these experiences for 3 weeks or longer, now we're talking about a depression that you're in. Now, what
Okay.
degree of depression? The way it's measured is like mild, moderate, severe.
Mhm.
Severe, we're talking about people who may be hospitalized. So that's like the far end of the spectrum. Someone
Okay.
who hasn't been getting out of bed, barely speaking, right? That's on the far end of the spectrum. Mild, yeah, like you're getting up, you're handling your responsibilities. Even moderate, you could be handling your responsibilities, but it's clear that there's something that's off. So when we're defining this, we're literally just looking at some sort of behavioral traits that are showing up, and for how long have they been showing up, and how
Right.
many out of different categories. But again, when I say imperfect science, um, it was primarily a bunch of middle-aged white men in a room deciding what was normal
Mm,
and writing a list. Okay.
gotcha.
So we just got to be clear about that. Now, over the years, that's changed a little bit. So maybe there are more women in the room than men. But
Okay.
again, it's a small group of people defining what's normal, right?
Hmm.
So I think what's important for our audience is just very, very simple thoughts, right? So more than 3 weeks of these symptoms. Now we're talking about something that's showing up in a way where we may want to pay more attention to it.
Okay. Okay. And then one other thing just on this line. So what about when something happens? Let's say we lose a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
And we're naturally sad because we've lost that person. So,
Mm-hmm.
and again, I'm using me as an example. Earlier this year I lost my brother.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember that there was a time where I was like, I don't remember laughing out loud. I don't
Mm-hmm.
remember the last time that I laughed out loud. And it was not a long time, but it was definitely more than a month that I was like, I don't remember the last time I did that. So, like you said, it's imperfect. Is
Mm-hmm.
that just grief? Is it depression? Is it just sadness? Like,
So this would be something where no one else defines that for you, and I think that the process of grief and loss is different for everyone, and
mm-hmm,
you go in and out of it. And I mean, you can have a loss and feel fine, and the next year, like you're very low. around
Yeah.
the same time of year. So it's really hard to kind of make the distinction between grief and loss. I mean, usually what I do with people is I'll normalize grief and loss for them so that so here's the thing. Whether we're talking about grief and loss or depression, the goal is going to be to help people to, one, identify what is it that I'm experiencing right now, and understand that any emotion we have is a wave, right? So what we want to do is we want to help this wave pass through our body, as opposed to what we experience a lot in life, which is we have a feeling and we kind of stop the processing of the feeling because it's like, oh, now's not a good time. You know, I'm at work, or my boss just said something and I don't like it, but I can't react because then they're going to talk to me about my reaction. So you just hold it. Or you have a feeling and then your child comes in the kitchen and you start doing breakfast because it's like, I don't want to cry in front of them. You know, my mother, when my sister died, my mother didn't want to cry in front of anybody. So she's just holding it and holding it. So whether we're dealing with grief and loss or we're dealing with depression, there's a part of the process where you just want to help people to be able to identify what is it that I'm experiencing right now, and how do I help this wave of energy to pass through my body instead of just sitting in my body. Because when we don't allow ourselves to feel it and process it, what happens is it goes a little deeper, and number one, it's going to last longer. Number two, you know, when you bury things, you kind of forget where you put them. And then one day they show up, and not necessarily when you plan for them to show up.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, that's, again, super helpful. And like you said, when we don't talk about it, you know, forever and ever, not only was it not talked about, but it was stigmatized as, no, you need to get up, you need to do something, you just need to move, you need to, you know, do something. But it's almost like we weren't allowed to, like you said, not allowed to let it pass through. It was just, we had to hold it because nobody was trying to hear it.
Yeah, but when you think about it, like historically, it was dangerous. You know, it was dangerous to emote your feelings because there are consequences. I mean, why do we teach Black men to like be very careful when they're having conversations with police or authority figures, right? And how it's important for them to control themselves, to remain composed, or Black women are being told again and again, you know, you can't be angry, you can't show up this way at work,
right?
But you see your colleagues show up that way at work, right? So like there are these consequences, and if we go back in recent history, I mean, the consequences were death. So maybe that has something to do with why we have a hard time processing what we feel and emoting, because there wasn't time to emote.
Right.
You know, like there are times where you just had to deal with things.
Right.
So here we are, and we're still kind of approaching life that way, where hard and really bad things happen, and you just got to deal with it. You just got to roll with it. You just got to keep it moving. I mean, these are all the things we tell each other, you know.
But you're right.
But,
you're absolutely right.
In my experience, eventually it catches up.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And, you know, you talk about it's going to catch up one way or another. It's going to show up, you know, at home. It's going to show up at work. And when it, like you said, you know, we don't want to cry. We don't want to, you know, get loud. We don't want to do all these things. So maybe you can help the audience figure out some ways to really navigate through these times. What are some, you know, we're feeling really sad. It's been some time. It's been 2 weeks. It's been 3 weeks. It's been 3 months, you know, that we have these feelings. We may have come from a family that said, you know, we don't go to counseling, you know, you don't need any therapy. You just need to buck up. You know, what are some ways that we can, as an individual, what are some ways that we can navigate through it? And then after that, my question is, as an employer, and then as a loved one, how do we navigate through someone else's depressive state?
Okay. Yeah. So therapy's just not for everyone. I mean, some people are not ready to go to therapy. They're not going to choose to go to therapy. So that's
Hmm.
just that's part of it. I think there are many different ways that you can approach dealing with depression for yourself or for a loved one, and that's
Okay.
all. It's really going to come back to self care. Like what does self care look like, and what are some ways that we can help ourselves to do things that are more of a deposit in our lives. So whether that's some sort of physical activity, if it's like eating healthy, if it's making sure you get proper rest, this time of year we get inundated with these messages on TV about seasonal depression. I mean, some of it is just basic, like you're indoors. Like if you're indoors, you're gonna be vitamin D deficient. So look
Hmm.
that like people could look that up. Like what are the symptoms of vitamin D deficiency? I mean, you go down south and you visit relatives. If you look at pictures of them from like 20 years ago, they were darker. When they become
Mm.
elderly, they're lighter and their skin looks kind of like ashen or sullen. Like they just look dull. It's because
Huh.
they're not going outside. They're not going outside. They're not getting sun. That's a problem because like our bodies, certain things are going to there are chemical reactions that are going to occur from going out in the sun and from having some sort of physical activity. When we're indoors, we're also drinking less water. So your water consumption is down. You get less sunlight. You're less active. You tend to eat food that's comforting, i.e., high fat, high sugar. Yeah, that's gonna feel great, but afterwards, it's not gonna feel so great.
Okay.
So there's just different things to kind of be aware of. Like this time of year, we eat differently. Our activity level goes down, and we live in a place that is just not very hospitable because it is cold, and
It's cold.
you want comfort in some way. So some things that people can consider if they have the ability to is, well, maybe you choose to work remotely someplace that is nice and warm in the winter as opposed to being here, or you change your routine. As the season changes, you may change your routine in terms of activity. What can an employer do? I think employers can do a wonderful job of just promoting self-care, right? And it's one thing to incentivize, like if you go to a gym, we'll pay $50 of your membership or something like that. I think it's
Right.
another thing to create space where you bring self-care to your employees. Whether you
Hmm.
bring like a massage therapist to come in during the work hours, or you
Right.
take your staff somewhere during work hours where you're promoting self-care. It's one thing to just tell people, oh yeah, we really support work-life balance, but by the way, get that report in by 5 o'clock tonight, no matter what.
When all the
Like
sun is gone.
right. So I think there are ways to kind of you can incentivize people
I
to
like that.
try to pursue different avenues for self-care. I worked for a company where they were training some staff to be yoga instructors, and then they would in turn offer yoga during lunch periods at work. So it's really just being creative with things like that. And I think what as a family member, it's kind of being aware when there's a behavior change with
Hmm.
someone. Like you said earlier, you had this period where you hadn't been laughing for a while. You just noticed there was something different. When you notice a family member is just really not enjoying life
Yeah.
the way that they normally did, just asking them some questions and do they need some sort of help or support? Because I think for a lot of people, okay, I'm depressed, but now what? I still got to go to
Mm.
work. I still got to pay the bills. The kids still need to be taken care of,
Right.
and I ain't got no help.
Yeah.
So how
Yeah.
does that work? And I'd say in that case, it's kind of helping one another to kind of build a network in your community of a network of support, so that you're not as overwhelmed with life. Because
Right.
too many
Right.
people, you're trying to do what's impossible and you know it, and that's another thing that leads to depression. Like when you're trying to solve an unsolvable problem.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that was excellent. Like you said, just being aware, in our family, uh, something ain't right. There's
Mhm.
something not right, and unfortunately, you know, I could look at someone and say, "Hey, something's not right." Doesn't mean that they're going to take it.
No.
Doesn't mean that they're going to accept that what I said. Um, they may just try to stuff it. They may just
Right.
try to push
Right.
on because, like you said, that's what we're used to doing. But
I think what usually helps people the most is giving people an example. I remember being a kid in middle school, and like Oprah was on, right? And like the thing about Oprah that was fascinating was like this woman was saying things that people don't normally say.
mm,
And so I think it's the same way with mental health. Like the more that people are able to talk about how they deal with their own mental health issues. There's a boxer right now out of Alabama, Deontay Wilder. I read this interview where he talked about, number one, how much love he has for other boxers,
okay.
how concerned he is for their own mental health and his own, and how many times like people who do what he does for a living, you don't really talk about what you're feeling. And the reason he was talking
Mm,
about it, I think a boxer had taken their life or something like that.
oh,
So
wow.
so he's taken upon himself to kind of talk about, yeah, we have some mental health issues. Like I mean, we do a sport where we might die tonight. Like we probably got some
It's real.
issues if
Just a
we're,
little
we're doing
bit.
something like that, right? So the
Right.
more that people are able to talk about the ways that they deal with their own mental health issues, I think that's the most powerful example we can have for people.
Hmm. Excellent. Okay. And I love the other thing that you said just about the employer,
Mhm.
not just saying go take care
Oh,
of
sure,
yourself, but
sure.
being super creative with how are you going to take care of you, light boxes. I remember some employer I was with. No, it wasn't an employer. It was during the pandemic. My children's school, they bought the kids light boxes,
Mhm.
just so that they could mimic being in the
Mhm.
sun. And
Nice.
my kids were like, this light is too bright, whatever. But not fully understanding the reasoning why. And
Mhm.
hopefully these conversations like this will help, help me, help other people, just to be able to, one, recognize, but to really be active, take an active role in our mental health, in our whatever state we're in, but also recognizing other people where they're at,
Mhm.
because it could be really easy to that irritated person who's like, oh, that voice, or whatever, and
Mhm.
just to be mad at that person and dismiss them.
Mhm.
But if we can recognize and be like, hey, wait a minute, they weren't always like that, or since then this happened, or whatever, we can bring some things to light. And I think that's going to be super important, for
Mhm.
all of us as just humans to each other.
Mhm.
So good stuff, good stuff.
Cool.
So if folks are experiencing any of these things, whether it is the feelings, the emotions, the prolonged emotions, do you have any resources that we could go to really just find out where we're at, where do we stand? Everyone has different health care. Some people don't go to their doctors or whatever, but
Right.
any resources that you might have.
Sure. I always refer people to Psychology Today because you can go online and you can look up therapists or psychiatrists, and you can sort it by insurance so that you're not wasting your time. You also get to see a
Nice.
headshot of the person and a little bit of a bio. So you can go on Psychology Today. If people are interested in finding a therapist that's Black, there's a website called Black Therapists Rock. So people can
I
go on
like
there
that.
and get a chance to see if there's a clinician that matches for them. And I mean, on a basic level, like people can talk to their PCP, their primary care doctor, about what they're experiencing. And most primary care doctors are comfortable. I mean, I can tell you what they're going to do. Like they're gonna suggest getting a therapist, or they're going to suggest like I can give you a mood stabilizer because that's something that PCP primary care doctors are pretty comfortable giving a mood stabilizer or some kind of medication for anxiety. But long term, they'll want you to follow up with a psychiatrist or nurse practitioner.
Okay. Well, super great information. I am so grateful to have had you on. I'm sure that we could
Mhm.
talk about so many different things. Like I said, not only depression, seasonal depression, postpartum, like there's so many levels and so
Mhm.
many social anxiety. Like there's so much that's going on. But thank you for shedding some light as to
Sure.
perhaps where we're at, or where a loved one's at, or where an employee is at. and then given some great resources as to where to get some help. So thank you so much. I appreciate you being
Thank
on.
you. Thanks
All
for having
right.
me. Appreciate
Well,
you.
good stuff, good stuff. And so to the audience who's there, again, thank you guys for tuning in. Absolutely always appreciate you being here, being a part of it. We hope that these and the other podcasts add to your life. I mean, if you're going to take a half hour out of a Monday, we want to make it meaningful. So hopefully Conversations with Teresa has been that for you tonight. So until next Monday, we look forward to seeing you. Have an amazing week. Thanks for coming.
Cool.